All right, we're going to look at exercises 4.7 through 4.9 because they're based off of the same information, quantitative information, question stem. But what we're doing here is we are starting to now determine the predetermined overhead rate and apply overhead to specific jobs. So really getting into the meat of a job order costing function or process, I should say. Remember, a job order costing system is all predicated on the fact that we are going to apply we're going to apply costs and specifically overhead to individual jobs using, in this case, a predetermined overhead rate. What scenario needs to be in place, or what characteristics or factors need to be in place for a job order system to be appropriate? Well, usually if each job or project that you're working on is unique as far as the types of materials it requires, the types of labor it requires, the quantity of each, the processes that are used to produce the product or provide the service, the end product is different from job to job. It's unique. Again, that word you're going to hear quite a lot when it comes to job order costing. If any of those factors are present, generally speaking, a job order costing system is going to be appropriate and it'll get you the most accurate cost related to that job. Why is that so important? Well, a lot of these jobs are bid basis, and I would want to have a good handle on what I expect the cost to be. That way I can bid appropriately and achieve then the profit margins that I expect to be able to sustain my business here. So let's look at the question stem here, and then we're going to go through exercises 4, 7, 8, and 9 here. So Nowitzki Corporation manufactures quote unquote swish bombs, a basketball related product. They have a heavily automated manufacturing process. They run production on 2 different versions of this product. Nowitzki Corp estimates annual overhead for the period to be $550,000. Due to their manufacturing process, they use machine hours as their basis for overhead allocation. They estimate total machine hours used will be 110,000 machine hours for the year. Job 1 uses 60,000 machine hours and job 2 uses 50,000 machine hours. Based on the above information, let's calculate the predetermined overhead rate. We'll round to the nearest cent if needed. So in 4.7, we're going to calculate that predetermined overhead rate. And remember, what is your formula for predetermined overhead rate? It's simply the expected annual overhead divided by the expected annual driver. In this case, the expected annual overhead was $550,000, as you can see there. The driver was 110,000 machine hours. Now remember, the driver is going to be based off of management's assessment of their production process. They feel that machine hours is the best indicator of when overhead is being incurred in the production here for Nowitzki Corp. Assuming that's correct, then we're going to get a more accurate allocation of overhead as opposed to using a different cost driver. But anyway, they've chosen machine hours. They estimate they're going to use 110,000 of them. They get a predetermined overhead rate of $5 per machine hour. So now, what does that number entail? What does that mean? Every machine hour incurred on a job or on a product, we assume that that job or product incurs $5 in manufacturing overhead, and therefore we're going to apply that amount to that job or product. So for every hour that's used, we're going to apply to it $5 in overhead. For exercises 4.8 and 4.9, it wants us to apply overhead to job 1 and jobs 2. And the information that you need to review is that last line in each question stem. Job 1 uses 60,000 machine hours and job 2 uses 50,000 machine hours. So now we can go ahead and allocate overhead or apply overhead to each job. How do we do that? Well, the formula is right there. Predetermined overhead rate multiplied by the actual machine hours used. Remember, we're going to use the same overhead rate to apply overhead to every job during the fiscal year. These numbers will be recalculated in the next fiscal year, but for right now, every job worked on during this fiscal year, we're going to use this predetermined overhead rate of $5 per machine hour. So for job 1, we use the $5 per machine hour, and job 1 utilized 60,000 machine hours. We multiply the 2, we're going to apply to job 1 $300,000 in manufacturing overhead. So we are estimating that job one, based off of using 60,000 machine hours, incurred or was responsible for $300,000 in manufacturing overhead. So we're going to assign that cost to that specific job. For job two, same process. We take the predetermined overhead rate, and it's still going to be that $5 per machine hour, the same one that we've used already. And we're going to multiply it by the amount of hours it used. In this case, job two used 50,000 machine hours, meaning we're going to apply to it $250,000 in manufacturing overhead. So if we were to ask you, we took this question a step further, and I was to ask you, what is the total cost, product cost of job one? Well, you would take the actual direct material costs incurred for job one, the actual direct labor costs incurred for job one, and this applied overhead amount of 300,000, and you would add them all up, and that would get you your total product cost for job one. And then if you knew how many units were produced in job one, you would divide the two to get the unit product cost. But that's why, again, why we're doing this. And remember, why are we even estimating overhead in the first place? Because it is an indirect cost. It's harder to track when is it incurred, because it's when things happen, it's not easily identifiable. It's hard to tell when utilities are being used or how much utilities are being used, how much indirect labor is being used, how much rent of the factory is being used. I can't watch a product being produced and say, oh, their rent is being used at that point in time. It's hard to make that determination. And even so, how much to allocate. So we're estimating the amount of overhead. In this case, we're using a single predetermined overhead rate to do that, utilizing that predetermined overhead rate we calculated back in 4.7.